Local Resident Producers Program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz here along with Dan Rylance, and Joe Ferlo from the Grand Opera House is back to give us an update on what's happening at the Grand. Later in this show we'll be talking with Mark Harris, the Winnebago County executive, and let me just say right up front, apparently they're having some equipment problems here at OCMS, and so we may or may not at some point during this show see names pop up and the show topic and so forth, so just so you're aware, right now we don't have any of those on-screen graphics, so that's why. So anyway, thanks, Joe.
Yeah. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Timing is perfect.
Yes, it is. Because as we tape this on the 2nd of July, the state budget was just signed earlier this week, and you guys are getting some money. I mean, some provisions were made in the budget to help you guys with your renovations at the Grand. How much money was provided for, and what kind of specifics are attached to that?
There is $500,000 in the capital improvements budget
Okay.
designated to support this project of repairing the Opera House,
Okay.
and it is written as such that it's not written to solve the problem. It's written to stimulate other solving of the problem.
Okay.
It is actually $500,000 that gets matched by up to $1 million. Thank you. $1 million towards the project. Now that number is still a little fluid. We haven't as yet nailed down the number that this entire project's going to cost. But so perhaps the right way to say this is up to $500,000 will become available to the city to repair this building, which I think is tremendous.
How did it get in the budget?
Well, Gordon Hentz deserves the credit for it. He and I sat down and we had a long conversation about what different routes we might take. With time, we were talking federal stimulus, we were talking state, we were talking what might be done at that level to help the city with this obligation to take care of the building. I didn't want to leave any stone unturned at that point. And really, when we started conversing, my thoughts, like many people thought about, the stimulus money that was out there and how could we, as it turned out, much of that was designated to be done in conjunction with environment and with energy and things for which we just didn't qualify. But Gordon worked hard behind the scenes to find a way to do two things, which I thought was great. One was to put it in the capital budget so that it was not impacting the operating budget of the state. I think that was important. I think he felt that was very important. I don't want to put words into his mouth, but I know that was. And second, he didn't word it in a way that said, here's me doing my thing to bail this project out. It was, let's see what the state can do. It's the state significance is not small. It's the oldest operating theater building in the state. So it's with that tag and with that idea that he went back and said, gee, we think this is appropriate to make sure this building is reopened, is repaired, and ready for public use again.
And that historical significance, Joe, I think is even more reason why the city needs to find a way to get this done. I realize everybody's in a financial crunch, and dollars are tight, but it really is more than just a performing arts center.
I would agree with you, of course, but I would never presume to sit here and say that streets and sewers and all of those things are not important. Of course they are.
Yep.
But places like the Grand, owned by the city, are part of the infrastructure of the city as well. It's part of what makes this city what it is.
Right.
Sometimes we have to go away or come in from the outside to really appreciate that. But these buildings don't pop up in every little city.
No, they don't.
In America or even in Wisconsin. It is a unique gathering place. It's older than the Eiffel Tower. It's been a fixture of downtown for 125 years. And I agree with you, obviously, for more than one reason, that it's absolutely vital that we repair this building, that we make it available to the use for the citizens and beyond.
Sure. Well, in its heyday, you know, way back when, there were some very, very renowned entertainers from Hollywood and New York who performed there.
Sure. At the time the Grand was built, I mean, Oshkosh was, I believe, the second largest city in the state.
Yep.
And it was not unusual for the Marx Brothers or, Barrymore's or the, of course, Harry Houdini and even, President. I'm going to lose it. President Taft appeared at the Grand. I mean, it was definitely a hotbed, and it was even on the vaudeville circuit. It was a great stop, much like it is now. I mean, it's really, when you think about the parallels, they're kind of funny. When I book an artist of greater stature into the Grand, and obviously it only happens once or twice a year. But it's the same idea. I have to catch the star when he's between X city and Y city, and Oshkosh is in the perfect place. Well, that's we don't do it by train anymore like they used to, but it's the same. It's the same principle, and it's true. The Grand has a great history of folks appearing on stage. But I think even more important than that is now the use that it receives from the people who live here. It's just a great balance. The number of high school kids who are performing on that stage. And that was, I mean, when people ask me what the hardest part about being closed for 6 months is, it wasn't so, it hasn't been so much, I mean, everything's hard about it, but the hardest part was facing these high school kids. And a couple of them, it was actually me breaking the news to them that the Grand wasn't going to be ready for them, and that their play that they had counted on performing at the Grand for was going to be somewhere else. They weren't going to get that opportunity. Kids would tear up, and they would get very emotional about it, and I felt bad. I mean, it's a big part of this community's lives, the kids and the adults, and that I think is just as important now.
Even as a youth, when I was in Oshkosh Community Players, we put on many events there until it, I'm trying to remember back, I'm kind of aging myself here.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember back to the 70s here a little bit, as to why we stopped performing there. Maybe it became too cost prohibitive.
It may have been that, at that point, there was a point right before the renovation when the infrastructure of the Grand, the lights, the sound, and the curtains and whatever were probably on the verge of disrepair, and it was probably just too difficult. I know throughout the country, you tell the story here. For me, it was in my hometown in upstate New York. The old theater, it's how I got the bug. The old theater there was in disrepair, and it got to be a point where you couldn't perform in it anymore. And that's great, because those people grow up and say the things that you're saying now, and that folks in the community are saying. We need this place.
Yeah, and it's not just about preserving memories, though. That really does. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, Joe, when you said it's part of our infrastructure, and it does bring in tourist dollars. It's not just about local dollars; it's tourist dollars that it brings in as well.
And it's part of. I mean, it's just part of a very big puzzle. That is downtown, and downtown's a hot button, and depending on who you talk to, it's a great place, or it needs help, or it's a black hole. I happen to think it's a great place, and it needs help. And places like the Grand, the downtown, like many downtowns, I believe, are morphing from retail centers to social centers.
Sure.
And our downtown is definitely turning into a social center. All you have to do is walk down on a gallery walk, or on a Waterfest night, or on a night when the Grand is open. The whole economy of that downtown is different when it's got a social function attached to it. And that's the kind of thing that we have to really foster in this downtown to create it as a destination.
Sure. We're still having some technical difficulties, but we're talking with Joe Ferlo, Executive Director of the Grand Opera House Foundation. Did I get that right this
That's
time?
good, yes,
All right,
very good.
excellent. All right, go ahead, Dan.
Okay, so we have a $500,000 stimulus money from the state. Walk us through the process. When are the bids going to be let? When do you take the $500,000 to the Common Council. Can you give us some dates and
Sure.
kind of walk through that with us? a little
As
bit?
you mentioned, it's July 2nd as
Right,
we tape.
right.
We're at the point right now where we're about to go into the bid process.
Okay.
I believe that the city has pre-qualified bidders because you don't want just anyone
Right.
bidding on the kind of work that we're
Right.
about to do. I know that I and some other folks will be walking contractors through the building
Okay.
in the next week or so, and then at that point they'll be putting their bids together. At this moment, the plan, as I understand it, is by mid-July,
Okay.
which is just a few weeks away,
Right.
the bids will be back.
Okay.
The bids will be opened.
Okay.
At the moment, on July 28th, I believe there is a workshop session scheduled after the regular Common Council meeting,
Okay.
at which time the bids will have been reviewed, and
Okay.
I assume there'll be a recommendation made and obviously discussion.
Any idea how many bids we're going to get?
I have no clue.
No clue.
Uh,
Okay.
that part kind of
Okay.
sits mercifully out of my
Sure. No,
my
I was
sphere.
just, Yeah.
But I mean, I would guess there'll be. I think there'll be more than one.
Yeah, hopefully.
Even with the pre-qualifying, I think one of the neat things about if there are silver linings, and there are a couple. One of them is it is a great time in this economy for bidding because
Absolutely.
people want the work, and I think the city has the opportunity to have some favorable and competitive bidding going on,
Absolutely.
which I think
Absolutely.
is really a good sign.
Yeah.
So to finish the
Okay.
answering your
Okay.
question, once we get through the workshop on the 28th, then I believe August 11th will be the meeting at which the council will vote
Okay.
towards whatever
To
funding
accept
package.
a bid to match the
Right.
$500,000 that you received from the state.
Exactly.
Okay. Is the State Historical Society on board at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
We've spent a lot of time with them. I personally, and they've come and they've toured the building. And they've had architects and advisors tour the building. We had gone. I think when last we talked, we were having some communication.
Absolutely.
issues.
It was not resolved.
All resolved.
Okay.
Now the folks, everybody is on board. The issue at the time was is can the ceiling be saved?
Yes.
And if it can't be saved, what are we going to do to document? Is there anything there that needs to be documented? What we determined, everybody was in agreement that the ceiling could not be saved.
Right.
And that was the hardest and most emotional decision. From there, it became a question of, is there anything underneath the wall coverings that are on the ceiling right now? I mean, all of that ornamental work that's done now was done in the 1980s, and it was sympathetic to the original design, but it wasn't original paint. So what they did was they brought in a consultant and basically, they strategically peeled back wall coverings and had look-see of what was going on there. And they determined that there was some original work, but it was done in a type of paint that was probably chalk-based, and it was not recoverable to the extent that, it was a great find. There's enough there that they wanted to document what the colors might have been and what the scheme might have been. And so the compromise solution has been that they'll come in prior to the ceiling coming down, and they'll do their research and they'll do their documentation, and they'll go from there. And to that end, our foundation worked with the city, and we obtained a small but important grant, $5,000 from the National Trust for Historic Preservation for the purpose of that documentation. So there was a little bit of money out there to be had, and we went for it, and we managed to find that as well.
So irregardless of what bid the city accepts, Wisconsin Historical Society isn't going to come in and say, you can't do that because they've already approved what you're asking for.
No, I think they're
in the bids.
comfortable now that that we, whether it's the Opera House Foundation or the folks at the city or both of us are combined, that we have enough of a thought of what the proper way of
understand.
approaching this is, that we're communicating with them, and they're going to get to do what they feel they need to do in the due process of what's going on. And most important, from the city's standpoint, from the engineering standpoint, they have agreed that, yeah, we can't save this ceiling. You're right. It needs to. It needs to.
Do you have any sense what the bids are going to come in at?
I wish I did. Folks ask me this all
I mean,
the
it's
time.
just a logical question.
It really is,
Yeah.
and yet, because the climate is so good,
Yeah.
it's hard to say. And like I said, I'd rather not say a number than say a number that might be high.
Of course.
And generate unnecessary angst. At this point, I really it could be anywhere. And obviously, when we were putting together the proposal for the state assembly and the Senate to review, obviously a number was put in there so that we could figure out where we were going with that. But what that number is as we put it in and what that number may be, boy, we'll know a lot in 2 weeks.
Okay, you're not going to like this speculative question. Is the higher the budget bid that they accept decrease your political votes on the council to get it funded through the city?
Does the money from the state decrease?
No. The amount that the city will have to put in to match the half, if it gets higher, does that relate to?
I don't think so. My
Okay.
understanding is that it will, that the match, it will be proportionate. Let's
Okay.
say, for instance, the project comes in at 1.2 million.
Okay.
Well, maybe we only get 400,000
Okay.
from the state, but there's still, there's still a match there. It's still there. It's still there's still going to be state support for the city's action.
Okay.
Which I think is
So if the bid comes in at 1.5 million, you get the full match from the state, is what you're saying? Yeah, okay.
Okay. So let's say the council, I mean, obviously you're thinking that they'll be voting on this on August 11th.
Right.
Let's say that they have the 4 necessary votes to approve this and move forward. How soon would work commence, and do you have some sense of how long it would take?
I sit in meetings regularly, weekly, with engineers and with folks from the city, and all I can do is relay what I believe. And you can expect I ask that question
I'm sure you do.
constantly. Assuming that everything moves in the timeline I just laid out, and that we get a let's move ahead vote in August, then my understanding is we'd be able to start right after Labor Day. And with that in mind, we're looking perhaps at February, March for completion. The project itself, start to finish, is not massive in terms of time, which is also good for the bottom line
Sure.
dollar figure when you think about it. So when it comes to my planning, that's kind of what I'm sitting on March, and I'm talking to the local folks who are usually our March, April, May renters, and saying, listen, if you want to grab a date on the calendar, what I would recommend is I'll start my calendar, I'll put your date down. I would recommend you have an alternate venue in place just in case, and at that point we'll know where we're going forward. But I have high hopes that if all goes as planned, the second half of our performance season, which as you know runs concurrent with the school year, the second half of the performance season will be back in the Opera House.
Okay.
And to that end, we'll only be announcing half of a performance season when we announce later in the month.
Okay. 2 questions, kind of related yet a little unrelated. Have you talked with any council members thus far to kind of see where they're at? And secondly, with regard to the funding of this, the state kicking in essentially a third. Let's say it is 1.2 million. The state says, okay, Grand Opera House and Joe Ferlo, we're going to kick in 400,000. As with any project, you ultimately have change orders. If there is a change order up, do they then kick in a little bit more? Do you go back to them? And conversely, if there's a change order downward, will you have to give some back?
Great question. I'll answer the second one first.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, well, that was, I'm so glad I asked
That's why he
that, 'cause
took the
it's
second one.
clear for me now.
My impression is that the process is fluid enough
Okay.
that number could go either way as our number goes. But sitting here right now, I can't tell you with certainty that that's the way it is.
I mean, I suspect with change orders usually are not too significant anyway, but it was just something that I was thinking about here as we were talking. Counselors.
As to the counselors, I try very hard to have a good relationship one-on-one with all of our counselors. I will say in advance, and perhaps with a little bit of an apology, I haven't had a chance to talk to Mr. Buchholz since he was appointed, and I should do that. And I will make a point to do that. I have talked with all the other counselors and have toured the building with virtually all of them as well, and tried to show them exactly what the issues have been. No one has offered whether their vote is up or down, nor have I asked. I just don't think that's appropriate. It is appropriate for me to tell them why I think it's important and why I hope their vote will go the way we need it to be. but I don't like to have that kind of relationship with our counselors.
Right. Did you have you gotten a sense,
though? Some of the things I've heard and have impacted what I've done or tried to help get done in the last few months. I've heard, gee, it'd be great if the Opera House Foundation could leverage funding from other sources. So our board authorized me to work with this project to make this thing happen. And while Gordon deserves all of the credit for making this thing happen, we did put my resources towards making sure he had everything he needed for it. We were actively involved. This small grant we got from the National Trust was something that we generated out of our office, and there are a couple other things that we're trying to do there too. So I'd like to think that we're doing our part to satisfy the concerns that some of the counselors said to me of, you guys are in position to help raise some money. Where might that go? And we're not done yet. We're talking to civic organizations yet. We're talking to individuals. But virtually everyone has the same response that basically you said at the top of the show. The city needs to take care of this. And many people are waiting to see what that August vote will be. I have donors who say, I can't write a check to you until I know if the building's going to get done, and who can blame them? So I think there is more support out there. I think we've done our due diligence in trying to help. At least I hope we have, and if not, someone will tell me that, and we'll see what we need to do. My goal is to make it easy for them as individuals and as a body to say, yeah, this is a good idea, and they're doing every bit they can to help us.
You've been doing a few shows in places in the Grand, though, like in the lobby and so forth, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. It's really kind of ironic when you think that the timeline, working backwards, the roof thing came from the sprinklers. The sprinklers came from the Grand Lounge. The Grand Lounge was because the lobby was too small, and now we're performing in the lobby.
Yeah.
For 50 people at a time. But I think it's vitally important that we remain an integral part of downtown. It's great that we go off to Kimball, and it's great that Alberta Kimball Auditorium is there for us to use. Thank goodness for that. And Lourdes and North High School and all those places we went to. But I think it's absolutely vital. We consider ourselves a resident of downtown and an active participant in downtown, and we want to continue to bring people there. Thankfully, that annex building is not the building in question, so we're able to operate that box office. The box office will reopen on Monday the 6th, and we're selling all of the summer shows that are happening elsewhere. We're selling the Symphony in its different locations, and we'll be, by the end of the month, selling our shows that'll be in different locations. But we've also created a little cabaret in the lobby, 50 seats, cafe tables, stage where you walk into the auditorium. We've done a couple of gallery walks, and we'll, with the exception of this 4th of July gallery walk, we'll be doing all the gallery walks in the lobby. We are actually, I'll be announcing in the next couple of weeks an actual performance. I found a play that works really well in an alternate space like that, and we'll do an all local cast thing. We had a lot of success a few years ago with a production of Escanaba in the Moonlight, starring an all local cast. It was well attended, and folks seemed to really like it. So we'll take that formula and make it work into our lobby. And for a few weeks, we'll have something going on right there in the lobby. The Grand Scoop will still happen on the square. We found some partners that we're very grateful for, climbed on board with us. Movies in the Park will be back this summer for 4 movies, free movies in the park. So we're trying to keep the energy in and around that building at a good level, even as we do a few shows in alternate locations in the fall.
Real quickly, you mentioned the lobby. I know our floor director has asked me to ask you the status of the new lobby, and has it been impacted at all by the renovations?
The lounge project, of course, has been greatly impacted in that when the building shut down, we stopped raising the money for it. It just wasn't appropriate because we didn't know what was going where. And it has been one of those issues where, again, folks say, don't ask me for anything for this until I know if the building's going to be done. Why should we do that? The good news is much of that was raised. No one's asked for it back. They're all content to wait. And the nature of the project that's going to be going on is such that while the roof and the truss work is being done at the Grand, the lounge work can happen concurrently. So when we talk about a March opening, possibly of the Opera House, that would also be a March opening of the new Grand Lounge, and we'll have the whole complex back and better than it ever was.
You have great spirits on this. How's your staff doing?
God love them. This staff, I can't say enough about them. They have walked through fire since February 27th, when I gave them 4 hours notice that we were moving a show with 500 people. And let's face it, it's an uncertain time. It was an uncertain time in the arts before our building was closed.
Right.
Now, having said that, we haven't come through unscathed. We've had our layoffs. We've had people I've lost along the way, and it's been very painful. We've held on to the core 5 or 6 people who are on the staff, and we're doing all kinds of different stuff we'd never planned on doing, and that includes me. But no job description is very linear right now.
That has to be fluid too, right?
But they are incredibly dedicated to what the Grand is, to the spirit of the Grand, not just the building. And they have worked tirelessly, without complaint, through uncertainty, and through uncertainty of the jobs, uncertainty of the economy, and uncertainty with the building. And now that we've gotten past the rescheduling stuff that was already on the books, and now we're into the planning on what to do until the building's reopened, a certain amount of that pressure is lifted. But they're incredibly creative. I mean, I've got a tech director. I said, I got to put a theater in the lobby. What can we do? He said, well, let me see what I can do. You know, and they are a tremendous staff. They really are. I can't say enough for them and for the folks in the community who stepped up when we were faced with this. I mean, we did 25 shows without canceling one over those months, and there are a lot of heroes on the staff and in the community to make that happen.
You started the show with a credit to Gordon Hentz, which was well deserved, and I don't think publicly it really has been made, but I think you deserve some credit. I don't think Gordon Hentz could have. You're kind of modest in saying you were providing with the background, but this was really a partnership with people like yourself and our assemblymen that brought this forward. So I think you deserve a lot of credit for
Thank
this
you.
too.
That's very kind.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's a labor of love. It's easy. It's easy to
clearly,
fight for this building and for what she is.
And I like Cheryl said at the beginning, this is just too important. This is Oshkosh, and you know, taxes is what we pay for a civilization, and this is part of our civilization.
What we save is who we are.
Yeah, well, that's even better.
That's a very good
point.
That's what our community is.
Yeah.
And
So-
this community is very good about it. There's no reason to stop now.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We've got like about a minute or so left, Joe. You know, in that amount of time, what would you like people to know about the Grand and you know, the upcoming events that hopefully will take place with
Thanks.
respect to its renovation?
I think the most important thing that we didn't touch on is that there are two things happening right now. We have to save the building, of course, and that's the obvious. The second is we have to sustain the organization that runs the building, that staff we're talking about, and the programming that goes on there. We're in a competitive business, education-wise, and this we all know this.
You need to get back.
There are other entities in the arts in our region, and we need to stay relevant. We need to stay, and that support that it happens to be our annual fund drive right now for the operation of the building. Boy, those donors are more important now than they ever will. Everything we do in terms of fundraising, not independent of the building, fundraising for the organization, everything we do right now in the summer is going to directly affect what happens in the next 2 or 3 years down the road. And I would just urge people to just keep, if everybody can try to sustain what they normally do over the next year. Any nonprofit probably can make that case.
Sure.
But even more so when we're trying to, there may be fewer shows and fewer staff and a lot of emphasis placed on getting the building reopened. But what good is the building reopening if this vital organization isn't around to program it? The nicest thing about the Opera House Foundation in the 5 years that I've been associated with, at least, is we have really tried to listen to the community and to program and to make that building available for everybody. We don't always succeed, no one can, but we've tried, and it's been very important, and it's vital that organization continue to thrive so that when that Grand opens, we've got traction and we're ready to move forward.
Sure, absolutely. Well, very good. Well, thank you so much for being here.
It's
Thanks,
my
Joe.
pleasure. I
Wow.
wish I had more better answers for you. Maybe
No,
we'll
I
have
think
to
you're-
follow up in a couple
You're
of
on the
weeks
right
again.
track,
Yeah.
though. You're on the
No,
right
no.
track, and we will have you back.
Yes,
You know,
thank you.
as we move forward
Absolutely.
with this. You know, probably after the council vote would be a good time to
Sure.
have you
It
vote,
would.
have you back, and you know, we'll talk about that, and or maybe not right after that, but shortly
Sure.
after that. So anyway,
Sounds great.
Joe Ferlo, Executive Director of the Grand
Joe.
Opera House Foundation. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be joined by Winnebago County Executive Mark Harris. We'll be right back.
Dear Mom and Dad, well, I finally have some time off, so I'm writing to tell you that I'm doing well. We have good days and bad days over here. We try to remember the good ones and get through the bad ones. Mostly we have each other, and that's what keeps us going. And Mom, since you asked, if anyone wants to help, just tell them to contact the USO. You can't believe how much they do for us. With love, your son, Michael.
Every year, the U.S. Department of the Treasury receives about 1.4 million reports of problems with paper checks. Checks can be lost, stolen, or delayed. If you still receive Social Security payments by paper check, Treasury wants you to know about a safer, more convenient way to get your money. The Direct Express Prepaid Debit MasterCard. The Direct Express card is new and is available to anyone receiving Social Security benefits, even if you don't have a bank account. Your monthly benefits will be automatically placed onto your card account each month on the day your money is due. While other debit cards cost money, it is possible to use the Direct Express card for free to make purchases, pay bills, and get cash at thousands of locations nationwide. There are no sign-up or monthly account fees. No more waiting for the mail or worrying about lost or stolen checks. Call 1-877-212-9991 or visit www.usdirectexpress.com.
We were in an emergency situation. We don't have extra. We have a little bit of water and a little bit of food. A meeting place, no.
No.
I don't think we have a first aid kit.
We have tuna fish, we have
Right.
beans, we have canned tomatoes,
True.
you know.
That's true, but that's really not survival food. Tomato paste.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And welcome back to the second half of Eye on Oshkosh. We're still having technical difficulties with getting names up on the screen. I was told during the break that it's probably a software glitch, and so totally beyond our control. So there will be no names, no credits at the end, nothing.
we have a guest.
Well, we have a guest, and he is a familiar face to viewers. So Mark Harris, Winnebago County Executive, is with us, and thanks for coming in, especially at such short notice. We had another guest booked. She kind of messed around with us for the second time, and so not giving us a whole lot of notice to to get someone in here.
He's
So
not only a sub, he's a good sub, because we always
Absolutely.
have something important to talk about.
yes,
so that-
absolutely.
you know.
So we appreciate your being here on a lot of different
bet.
levels, Mark. So first and foremost, you know, as we mentioned with Joe in the first half, you know, as we're taping this on July 2nd, the state budget was just signed earlier this week. You know, we know it's a bad budget. We know that, but what does it mean in terms of Winnebago County?
I think there are some cuts to human services in this budget,
Okay.
but you know, there's a lot of moving parts. You know, if you're serving more people through the food share program or more people through the income support area, you get more revenues because you're serving more people. So, but there were some big changes for us. There'll be a cut in revenue sharing. I haven't quite sorted out what the final numbers are. I think they talk about it in terms of percentages, but there might be a complicated formula behind it so that not every community is affected the same.
Okay.
But actually, counties don't rely on revenue sharing as much as municipalities. We get more of our revenue in a percent from the state and federal government, but revenue sharing isn't the program that gets it to us.
Right.
There's a shift in who pays for mental health placements for people under 22 or people over 65. And some of the cost of that is shifting from the state onto the counties. And that's a big one because the daily cost is really high in a mental health institute.
What is it, for example? Do you know?
I'm
offhand?
thinking $900 a day.
Wow.
So
And that over 62 category is a growing one, isn't it?
It is. And we also don't control who gets placed there. For instance, if the police department in Menasha finds someone wandering in the street that's very confused and chooses to take him to Winnebago Mental Health, that bill goes to the county.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
so we don't have complete control over it, and it's extremely expensive. So a shift on who pays for those two categories of people, it might not affect anyone in a given year, but it might be 3 or 4 people, and depending on how long their stays are, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
There were some minor cuts to other programs, the administration of the income support area, some of the monies for juveniles, and so the human service area is probably out about $600,000. But we had a victory in the nursing home area,
Okay. Well,
where
that's good.
there's, you know, it's complicated, but there's monies that come from the federal government to reimburse for county nursing home losses. And the state has traditionally diverted half of those funds to other Medicaid qualified programs. Well, there was a real lobbying effort by the Wisconsin Counties Association, by Margie Rankin, my nursing home director, and many other nursing home directors, and some county executives like myself, and some of the staff from the nursing homes, to show the state that at the current rate that county nursing homes are closing, the state was actually cutting off a revenue source for their other Medicaid eligible programs, because as county nursing homes close, the county nursing home losses would be diminished and less federal money would flow in. So I think when we got them to see how the money flows work, they realized that anything that was putting those county nursing homes in jeopardy was actually harming the state budget. So they restored a portion of the funding that the original version of the budget took away from us. And then they actually revised another part of the formula that put another $1 million into the pot statewide. So there's actually an increase in revenues to the nursing home. So when I look at the budget in total, we took a small hit, but one that might even be less severe than what you'd expect in light of the size of the state budget hole.
In terms of personnel countywide, with this budget, how many jobs would you say you anticipate losing?
I actually think we'll be able to hold on to everybody.
Really?
You know,
All right.
we acted a little different than a lot of the counties did. Back when the levy freeze came in, we started looking for attrition, and we did do some layoffs early on. We took away some benefits like the sick time payouts. We took those away from the non-represented employees. We got the unions to put a greater spacing between their step increases. And we actually started building our reserves a little bit. I think some of the counties didn't take quick action, and they used their reserves to kind of fill the gap between their operating revenues and their operating expenses. So what happened is they went into this budget cycle in a weaker position than they had been in before. So they're really not in a position to deal with these cuts. Also, you know, most counties receive sales tax revenue. If you use sales tax revenue, you have to have larger reserves because those are more volatile than the property taxes. We have higher property taxes and rely on those, you know, entirely for our local revenues rather than having the combination. So that is more stable.
Okay.
So while some counties may be looking somewhere between a 2 and 7% reduction in the revenue flowing to them from sales tax, since we don't have that, we just have to look to see what happens with the property tax base. And I don't think it's growing, but it's relatively stable.
Okay.
Is furloughs something that applies to county employees?
Yes, a lot of counties are thinking about furloughs.
Okay.
Some are talking about voluntary furloughs. Some are talking about mandatory furloughs.
But this isn't being mandated by the state, as in the case of the UW system or state employees, or
Well,
is it?
just with a few. You know, there are some people that work with the county that are hybrids in that regard.
okay,
You know,
okay.
the extension service, several of those
sure,
people, the
okay.
cost is split between the state
Sure,
and the
I
county.
understand.
To the extent that the state furloughs them, that'll reduce our costs because we won't pay them on the days they're not here. There's some areas that are very confusing. The judges and the court recorders and the DA, those are state employees.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's always difficult, I think, for people to understand because it's the Winnebago County DA, it's the
Right.
Winnebago County DA's office, and yet they are state employees. And on a previous show, we had on Christian Gossett, our DA here in Winnebago County, and he was talking a little bit about that.
Yeah. They
and
clearly
how
apply
it's-
to his prosecutors.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
But a point I'd like to make with furloughs, a lot of people say, oh great, that'll save money. From the perspective of the employee, it's a pay cut.
Right.
So if you cut 5% of the day someone's working, that's a 5% pay cut, and that's less money that they're spending in the community. And then they're also off more days. I mean, to make that work, they have to be off days in addition to days they would be off for vacation. And I can't believe you can do a lot of furloughs without disrupting the service to the public. So if I can avoid those furloughs, I would like to do that.
Okay.
How have you followed this budget? I mean, do you personally? I mean, this must be a nightmare. I mean, what are the logistics? Everything is computer? You work maybe with your budget? How do you keep up with this, or how have you kept up with it?
Well, the Wheeler report is a daily political report.
Okay.
And I did follow those stories on a daily basis, and so the amount of new information was limited on a given day. And then also the Wisconsin Counties Association has people that follow the budget, and I've got a report here, in fact, that's a summary of the governor's vetoes.
Okay.
So the initial budget as proposed by the governor was pretty tough for us. The Assembly made it a little bit better. The Senate made it better yet. All those favorable provisions made it through Joint Finance and the Conference Committee, and then a little bit of that was taken back by vetoes by the governor. But all in all, I have to say that the county, by rights, should have expected some cuts because of the financial situation. We took some cuts, but certainly not a disproportionate share. If anything, we came out better than some other entities.
Well, I realize that you're no longer in city government, and you probably don't follow it as closely as you do the county government because you don't need to. But and we're going to be having City Manager Mark Roloff on, in about a month to talk about things like this. But you used to serve on the city council, and what do you think that this budget means for the city?
The city of Oshkosh was always on a bare bones budget, and they fell behind badly on their infrastructure, and they just had started to catch up on the streets. So they don't have any fat to trim, and this budget is going to take money away from them.
And as you said earlier, shared revenue cuts hurt cities more than it does counties.
Yes, because it's a higher percentage of their total revenue. So I think they're going to have a real tough budget.
And the shared revenue, when it started being cut several years ago, Oshkosh was one of the places that really felt it the most, more so than places like Neenah or Menasha or Appleton or, And I'm not really sure why that was. I just know that that's what I've heard from a lot of different people, is that Oshkosh was really getting hit hard with this, more so than other folks.
Well, the monies are allocated under really complicated formulas, and there's always been friction over the years between the towns wanting changes to the formula that would get them a larger share of the money, and the cities wanted changes that would give them a bigger share, and then even between the big cities and the small cities, there was rivalry on how that should be computed. But the revenue sharing monies are important to Oshkosh, and those cuts are going to be felt because there's really no fat in that budget.
Yeah. Well, let's just take away the allocated methods of figuring all this out. Just give us back our money. It's our money, State of Wisconsin. Just give it back to us.
I'm amazed that this state, which has such a great progressive tradition in terms of government, and I don't care which party it is, how do you explain that they do their budgets in their caucuses in the dark? I mean, what's the explanation for that, if there is one?
Well, the only thing I can think of is that when you have a budget like this, where you're going to make everybody angry, because you're going to have to, all those people that are used to receiving funds from you are going to take some kind of cut.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to raise some revenue, and that's never popular. I think there just isn't the courage to do the job in the light of day. So they have to, they have to take their poison a little at a time, in the middle of the night. So it is a shame the way it was done. I do appreciate, however, that it was done on time.
Oh, absolutely,
Yes. Oh, yeah.
absolutely. No
And-
question about that.
and
But
I-
you couldn't have, Winnebago County supervisors couldn't lock themselves in a room with you and, I mean, there'd be hell to pay, wouldn't there?
Oh, well, the states pass laws. It doesn't allow us to do any of the things they do.
It's just
So-
it's bizarre.
I think under the circumstances, though, they had an enormously difficult job. I don't like the style in which they did it,
Yeah.
but the fact that they managed to reach some sort of solution on time is a plus.
Yeah.
Now I'll give you the negative. I don't think it's a balanced budget. I think there's as much smoke and mirrors in getting this job done as ever. So if the federal government's stimulus money goes away in the next biennium and our economy's in a very slow recovery pattern, the worst budget might not be this biennium. The worst budget will probably be the next one. And I'm kind of expecting that, so I'm still in a mode where I still want to build up a little bit more reserves because I don't want the county to fail to deliver on any of its essential functions. And to do that, I really need to put us in a good position to go into the next biennium, because that could really be the disaster.
Okay.
Well, that is a criticism of the Doyle administration, not just this budget, but previous ones, that it is a smoke and mirror sort of budgeting process.
Well, it's been a pattern in Wisconsin for a long
Yeah,
time
that's true.
now,
It's
where
not- yeah.
they declared a balanced budget, but any sort of generally accepted accounting principles would come up with huge negative numbers. and this isn't the first administration to do this. It's been several administrations
That's true.
in a
Good
row.
point. Yeah.
Right. Anything else that either of you have on the budget before we move on to something else?
I want to comment on the Opera House.
Okay, go
good.
ahead.
And, in the statewide media, that was held out as, some sort of foolish expenditure. But, that Opera House is the oldest theater in Wisconsin. It's older than the Eiffel Tower. It was built by the community originally. So to just let it go would be a horrible, irreparable shame.
Absolutely.
And I like the way this one was structured. It wasn't a gift to pay for it. It's like a matching grant, matching 50 cents on the dollar
Yeah.
for the money that the local community puts in. And we see those all the time with programs where there's some sort of match. If Oshkosh recognizes the value of that, and they are going to have to take their own budget considerations in mind when they do it. But if they recognize the value and are willing to come up with $1 million, a $500,000 match to give them some incentive to get that done, I think is brilliant. So what many people are holding out as the most foolish thing in the budget, I think if they knew more about Oshkosh and more about our Opera House, they wouldn't see it that way at all.
If they knew more about the budget, they might think that it's not the most foolish thing in the budget. Well, let's talk about the Oshkosh by Gosh building,
Yeah.
because
Yes.
you guys are looking at using that as some kind of facility for the county. Tell us about that.
Well, let me tell you the history in that we had 2 old nursing homes up on our north campus, which is still in Oshkosh, but on the north side. And they weren't meeting modern standards for nursing homes. So we built a new nursing home with private rooms. We're able to deal with the people with a greater level of dignity. And it's also able to reduce our operating costs and increase our Medicaid reimbursements, because those are in part based on your depreciation and interest. So we had these 2 buildings that were supposed to come down. There's still 2 programs in the older of the 2 buildings. In the pavilion, there's a Second Chance program, which is a special high school program to give troubled teenagers a chance to get back on track with their education and hopefully go back to their own schools and graduate with their school. The other thing is the Department of Health, which is also in the opposite end of the basement of that huge building. So to bring those buildings down, we have to get those 2 programs out and put them in a suitable location. We also have an IT hub, unfortunately, underneath the pavilion, where all the fiber connections and whatnot are. I'm not a very technical person, but I know it's there and it's important. Well, we had decided that maybe the way to go, rather than building a new building, that we could save money by taking the newer of the 2 nursing home buildings, which is Pleasant Acres, And we could renovate that, which would be substantial because it would need new windows. It doesn't have a heating plant. That's in a separate boiler facility that heats those two buildings. So it was going to cost us $10.8 million for about 85,000 square feet. We could relocate those things, and then we could address some needs we have. The IT department in the courthouse is exceeding the electrical supply that the courthouse can provide it, and exceeding the cooling ability of that building. So we could get them out of there and free up some space there. And then the idea was that I could bring some things out of rented spaces like the DA's office, and I'd have to rearrange some other offices to do that. But the ideal location for the DA would be in the Orrin King building, which is right next to the courthouse and actually attached to it by tunnel. So we were just about to vote on this $10.8 million renovation when the Bagash building came up. And they said, well, we'd like you to come look at this building, and we think you'll like what you'll see. I was a little bit afraid of it at first, because if I looked at it and it was an acceptable alternative but not a great alternative, I might end up with a board where part of the board would want to go to the Bagash building and part would want to renovate Pleasant Acres. And for capital improvement, I need a 3/4 vote. So I had a real fear that this opportunity would make it impossible to get 3/4 vote for either project, which would leave me heating buildings that are very expensive to heat that are nearly empty. But when I went over and looked at the Bagash building, there's actually 3 different buildings there, 2 which are connected and 1 which is freestanding, about 95,000 square feet. And I think we can accomplish everything we were going to do with the original project for at least $5 million less. So it's a real opportunity for the county to save money, to keep more people downtown, and to meet some future space needs, have some options. For instance, if we can ever get moving on consolidating the health departments, we would now have the space to do that. I could probably bring in all of our income support people that are in the AT&T building. I might be able to bring them into this building someday, as well as having other government agencies that are in there leasing from the county rather than the county paying rent money out. So there's a lot of chance to save operating money with this project and to have the project come in well under what we would have spent.
Have you been in the building?
Is the Oshkosh-Bagash building?
Yeah.
Well, it's been a number of years ago.
What do you? I mean, can you tell us? I mean, what condition is it in?
Well, it's a very old building.
Okay.
The front portion, which is a portion that would still be leased back to Carter's,
Okay.
for some of the people that will continue to work there, was built in 1887.
Okay.
But it's been beautifully renovated.
It looks nice from the outside there.
Yeah.
The main part of the building, over 81,000 square feet, which has a Otter Street address,
Okay.
that was built in 1929. So again, it's an old building, but it's been updated on more than one occasion, and it's been well done. And it's even nicely furnished. Part of this project is, we're still negotiating over the price.
Sure.
But we're looking at something like half the assessed value of the buildings for the buildings, the land, and most of the furniture in the building.
Okay.
And it's already set up as offices, so our renovation costs will be very small compared to what they would have been converting a nursing
How about
home.
ADA? Are you thin on that?
We're going to have to make sure everything complies.
Yeah.
And we will do some renovations there. I mean, the Department of Health, for instance, should have examining rooms, and that's not exactly the same as an office. But we should be able to pretty readily remodel that.
Well, this makes up for a bad biennial budget in a part, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. It does. Well, that's how things are working. There's always something big. Whether it's downsizing and modernizing of the nursing home one year, maybe it's entering family care, which reduce county costs for a series of years. Maybe getting into this building and reducing our rental costs. I kind of have to pull a rabbit out of the hat every year to make the county's budget work well. But either through good planning or luck or a combination of the two, opportunities have always presented themselves, and this is one of those occasions. Now, the board has to approve it. I honestly believe that when they see the opportunity, that I think they'll pretty soundly approve it. But it's a slow process. It has to go through a lot of committees. They've already gotten through facilities and Personnel and Finance Committee a resolution to fund a number of studies. Have someone look at the asbestos,
Okay.
look at the structure of the building, check it for termites. You know, we're going to do our homework.
Yeah.
Just because there might be some defect not known to us or the Bagash people that we should know about.
Absolutely. And they are old buildings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But just to my eyes, the condition of the buildings, the furnishings that'll be provided, the amount of space we have, it's a real opportunity for the county.
Yeah, the part of the building that's on Otter Street is the part that I was in, but that too has been, late 70s. I used to have a roommate way back when who worked there, and so that would have been the last time that I was in that building. But
Parking behind the building goes with it?
Yes, 128
Okay,
spaces.
okay.
We will probably reserve a portion of those for the Bagash people.
Okay.
And then we'll have a number of spaces near the building that would be for the public coming in for public health or whatever other services we offer that bring the public in. And then there still would be enough for employee parking. And you know, that's always been a problem over at the courthouse. So by moving some people away from that campus to this building,
Should help.
it actually should relieve some of the parking issues over there.
you were talking, Mark, about how it's set up with so much office space already, which is a lot of what your needs are. IT needs have certainly changed dramatically over the years, so I would assume that's probably going to take probably not a huge amount of money, but certainly a reasonable amount of money to bring that up to the standards that you guys need these days.
Well, remember, that was a main IT hub for Oshkosh-Bagash.
Oh, it
So-
was, okay.
So
All
they
right,
have
okay.
a
All right.
very sophisticated computer room with, I think they call it Hellion fire suppression and the air conditioning. It's
But
actually,
throughout the office spaces,
well, we'll have to get the county's fiber to it.
okay.
But it's already set up for, for computers. So the building's already wired, and there's
Okay.
already a computer center in there. So it's actually a better physical room for our equipment than what we're in
Oh,
now on
that's-
the 5th floor of the courthouse. Of course, the
That
courthouse is
makes-
an old building too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that makes it an attractive option as well.
Well, the county, you're not going to believe this, but the county has offices, and I don't know how many buildings, but I counted 14 that I could think of where we have people. If I get one large building and can get that total number of buildings down, I think I could save a lot of money on operating costs.
Okay, good. Anything else on the Bagash building?
That I think that pretty well covers it. It's an opportunity. I hope the board agrees with that, and I think they will.
Okay. Have you talked with some of the board members as far as
Well,
where
we
their
had the
thoughts are?
facilities and the P&F committees through the building. So most other board members haven't been through the building yet. The ones that have, there's some that still have some concerns. But the ones that have been through are generally open-minded, and most of them are favorably disposed to it. So, I think it's something that once everybody sees it, if there's no hidden problems, the amount of the savings to the taxpayer is probably going to carry the day.
Okay. In our remaining minutes here, Mark, you are on the steering committee for group Citizens for a Strong Oshkosh.
Yes.
And, as we tape this, it was, I believe, last week, or maybe 2
2
weeks
weeks, I
ago,
think.
that they held their first public meeting. Can you just talk a little bit about, your involvement with the group and what your feelings are about where they're going and the direction that it's been going in since that meeting?
Well, the purpose of the group is to say, look, we know there's tough budget situations, and that there's going to have to be, spending cuts on the state level and perhaps revenue enhancements. And people don't like either one.
Right.
But it seems like some people were saying any sort of change in revenue, any sort of tax increase is off the table and shouldn't even be discussed. And it just should be cuts. Well, of course, either one hurts the economy in a bad economy. Spending cuts or tax increases, they both take money out of the economy. So we wanted people to have some sort of balanced discussion. Like, is there any revenue increases that would be preferable to some of the budget cuts? And we face a number of problems in the county. For instance, Valley Transit is likely to lose its federal subsidy, and it's going to be very hard for them to continue to operate that system. The city of Oshkosh losing some revenue sharing. City of Menasha with the steam plant. So we just wanted to stimulate a fair discussion. And I think the group has kind of done that. And also there's an awful lot of misperceptions out there. And I'll give you a good example. A lot of people
We
think,
don't have
boy,
time. I'm sorry, Mark.
it'll have to be another show then.
It'll be another show, and we are trying, just so you know, in the audience too, to get someone from that group on
Yeah.
when they are a little bit more,
Further
organized
along,
and so
yeah.
Sure.
forth. So anyway,
Sorry to cut
thanks
you
much
off.
for being here,
Thanks,
especially
Mark.
on such short notice.
Well,
With a
thank
holiday
you.
weekend coming
Yeah.
up, so.
Yeah, good luck.
Anyway,
Thank
thanks
you.
to the crew, thanks to you at home for joining us as always. We will see you next time. Until then, take care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.